I guess one of my just like questions or curiosity is that I have never heard of like doing a health check before.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if it's not as common in the US or I just haven't seen it in like the forums and like the things I've read and stuff. So I'm just kind of like nervous about like doing one and like how to not make it awkward with the client and like how to make it like flow naturally.
Yeah, that could be language that you hear me say more. Firstly, having come from like a parlor background where it's very clear what everybody's there for.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and everybody's different, right? Including in America, some people are more upfront about than others because you've come from like the sugar relationship arrangements. It's not surprising to me that that's something that you wouldn't have heard about before because the whole concept is that you're just like two individuals kind of coming together. Basically, it's not as clearly a transaction.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what the health check is really just looking visually for any obvious health issues with the client around their genitals. Every escort does it differently. Some
Mhm.
escorts are really quite invasive about it, or invasive isn't the right word, thorough. So they'll
Mm.
get the client in the bathroom before they have a shower. They'll say, "Oh, I'm just going to do a bit of a health check. Do you mind just like pulling your pants down?" And under a light, they'll like move the balls and stuff around. And what you're usually looking for are just obvious issues, right? Like we're not doctors, and some diseases like chlamydia and gonorrhea are symptomless anyway, but you're looking for things like rashes,
Mhm.
warts, which sometimes can be a bit misleading if the client has skin tags on his genitals, which is not abnormal.
Mhm.
Some escorts, if the client has a foreskin, will pull back the foreskin to check if there's anything happening under that. So, like any gunk, any weeping or anything from the penis,
Yeah.
which like that can be like a gonorrhea or chlamydia sign.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So they're generally just looking around, and then for escorts who go the extra step, may even look inside the client's mouth, because in some extreme cases, like clients can have, you can get gonorrhea, chlamydia in the throat. You can get thrush in the mouth. So you'd be looking
Mhm.
in the mouth, or cold sores, for example, cuts. So it really just depends on the escort's comfortability.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
terms of doing it naturally for the client, it's a bit of a sliding scale. So when I work, what I do is I do tell the client directly when he's in, like I'll escort him into the bathroom. And I usually have mouthwash and stuff set up for him because I'm a bit funny about like mouth, like bad breath.
Okay. Yeah.
Really, really irritates me. So I'll have stuff set up, and then I'll say to them, "Hey, do you mind?" And I'm like flirty and polite about it, but I'm like also, how much can we dress this up, right? Like I still have to say directly, I'm just going to do a bit of a health check. It's your free like doctor's visit. Let me have a quick check, and we'll have a chuckle. I'll pull their pants down. I'll move stuff around. 99% of the time, there's no problem. I'll look up at them and say, "Lucky you, you're a healthy, healthy boy." And then I'll leave him usually to have a shower on his own. And that's the most that I do.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense, and it doesn't seem like it seems like there's a way to do it that's still like professional, but also like not just so like medical. Like I don't know. I just never heard of it before, so I was just trying to figure out how to do it and stuff.
It depends too on the breadth of your services. The
Mhm.
more the more services you offer, particularly uncovered oral, the more
Yeah.
it's probably the case that you should consider doing that, because uncovered oral is really the thing that brings you at risk of things like chlamydia, gonorrhea, warts, herpes. It's really
Yeah.
that service, and some of those diseases will have visual representations, and therefore you
Mhm.
could avoid a situation like that. So it's really to your judgment. There are, of course, some escorts who won't do that or who may do it more discreetly right before the sexual service. The issue, I think, with that is one, if the client has showered, he may have showered away some obvious issues,
Mm-hmm.
especially like weeping and stuff from the penis. Like if that's only small and he's had a
Yeah.
shower, he could have like washed it away for just long enough to get away with the service.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, if you're literally about to have sex with somebody and then all of a sudden you see something, it is even more awkward to deal with. So
Yeah.
my preference is to be direct about it, honest, so I can catch a problem in advance. And if we put ourselves in the client's shoes, unlike the sugar arrangement where maybe everybody wants to pretend that we're not doing it with other people, the
Mm-hmm.
client could get a level of comfort knowing that you're an escort who does this, because the reality is you're seeing other people. And if you don't do it with him, it means you're not doing it with others. You know, some clients aren't going to think like that, but they're certainly not. It's never been my experience that a client is upset about the health check. Like, sure, they want to get it over with, but they get it.
Okay. And then what usually happens, like, if you do see something and, like, what alternate services, like, would I be able to provide? Or if I had to cancel the session, like, what's, like, the nicest way to go about that?
Yeah, this is such a good question, and also can be a bit contentious just depending on the person. The first thing is it depends on what you find. Like,
Mhm.
an example that I use is I had a client once who presented with a cut halfway down his penis. So no disease, but what that meant was if I was going to give him uncovered oral, I was now exposing myself to blood, which is how HIV is transmitted.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So in that scenario, I was willing to just change the service by making sure that there was a barrier between myself and the cut at all times. So what I said to him was, "Oh, I've noticed like this on your penis. I'm not going to be able to do an uncovered blowjob, but I can either use a condom or I can put my hand on it over it and go to the point of where my hand is." And I can't remember what he chose, but that's how
Mhm.
I chose to deal with it. Some escorts may not give them that option. They may just say, "Oh, I've noticed this. This is what I'm going to do." And it depends too on how explicit you've been in advance. Like, if I was in a situation where I had never specified with the client what I was going to do anyway, then it probably wouldn't be necessary for me to then say, "Oh, I'm going to do this instead," because I've never promised anything. But if he
Yeah.
mentioned it, maybe I would say, "Well, yeah, I've done that for this reason." However, if I had a client who I knew was probably expecting that I did an uncovered blowjob, even if we hadn't spoken about it, then I would probably still point it out to him so that he understood if he comes back another time and there is no cut, then I'd be happy to do it my usual way. So
Yeah.
it all depends on what's happened. If a client presented with an obvious STD, like I've had a client present before with clearly thrush, like a rash all over himself.
Mm-hmm.
In that circumstance, I kept the money that he had paid me. And I said to him, "I'm obviously not going to be able to see you today. I'd like you to leave." And he was a bit abashed, as you can imagine, but he left and that was it. Like, in my view, you've come here clearly with the disease
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like I've set my time aside. But what I have to be conscious of and cautious of is luckily he was like, "Yeah, okay," and just left, like with his, head between his his feet.
Okay.
But if he had have kicked off about it and become aggressive and upset, my go-to response for everybody is you never want to be alone in a room with a man who's upset. And if I have to give him money back to get rid of him, then I will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Lastly, you can always, if you're comfortable, enter into a conversation about it. So, for example, I've had clients present with skin tags. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
skin tags before, so I know what they look like. But I've had some clients where they look a bit different. And so I've said to them, are these skin tags? Have you always had them? And then I have to
Yeah.
make a judgment call based on their response. They obviously could lie. and be
Mm-hmm.
covering something up. But because I've been working for a long time and I've seen most of this stuff, I kind of would just make a decision on the spot of what I thought. However, when in doubt, if you do everything protected, including oral, you severely decrease your chances of getting anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And no matter what I find, except for maybe the situation when the client presented with the rash, although I still wasn't rude, I was just firm. I was just like, look, I clearly can't see
Yeah.
you, so I need you to leave. But it's not like I screamed at him or got aggressive because it just doesn't serve anybody. I just got rid of him and never saw him again, kept his money. It's not necessary to get upset. So it depends too on how you handle it. That's actually the last thing I will say is if you haven't done this before, I recommend you research STDs, look them up on Google, look at
Yeah.
photos of them on male genitalia, just so you're familiar. Because when we don't know, you might encounter something. And like I said, it could just very well be skin tags, but because you have never seen it before, you have no idea. And it's always helpful to be armed with knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I was planning on doing some research just so I have like a better understanding.
If you want to learn more escorting tips, just click the link below this video.